on taking off your video or showing your screen name during the recording, that's fine with me. The recording usually only records the people who are unmuted and speaking. So if you'd prefer not to be recorded, feel free to just use the chat to ask your questions. I will do my best to monitor the chat while I do this presentation, but it might be most effective to use the raise hand feature or turn on your video and unmute to get my attention, just because I'm working off of both screens right now. So I will go ahead and dive in. And what I want to do to start off is allow some space for Kate Middaugh to introduce herself and her team. This is a new program this year that we're offering our applicants. We've hired Kate and her team to provide technical or adaptive support to any of our grantees or grant applications this year, applicants this year. So you can access Kate's professional services for up to 2 hours this year. This could include asking questions about specific questions in your narratives, or sending Kate a complete draft of your application and asking her to review and suggest edits accordingly. It is limited to just the 2 hours, and Kate will be tracking that on her end. No need to track it on your end. You can communicate virtually. You can communicate over email or phone. So I'm going to ask that Kate unmute and introduce herself, as well as chat in her contact information into the chat so that you all can access this. This is also listed on our website under the grant writing section, but feel free to take it over, Kate.
Hi, thank you, Taylor. This is Kate Middaugh, and I'm sorry I don't have access to video right now. I'm on my phone, but I'm really excited to participate in this project. I've been grant writing for, gosh, I think it's over 20 years, raised over $50 million in Northern Utah. My goal is to help our nonprofits in Utah build their capability and their capacity to serve their mission. And so I'm excited to work with all of you. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat box, and feel free to contact me. And I hope everybody takes advantage of this amazing opportunity that Taylor is providing you. I believe Danielle is online as well, and Danielle Colyer is with us, and she is also going to be helping us. Danielle has been working with us for over a year now, and I think her last post, I think she's raised just in this year about $800,000 for our local nonprofits. So you'll be working with the two of us, and then we have a third person, and I don't know if Kelly's online or not. And Kelly comes from Indiana, and she's got decades of grant writing experience as well. And so we're really excited to work with all of you.
Thanks so much, Kate and Danielle. We sure do appreciate you. And I should also say, there's a lot of construction going on in front of my house right now. I try to be as distraction free as I can, but I just want to warn everybody that if you hear a loud noise, I'm okay. They're just tearing up the street. So but with that, I am going to dive right in, and I will go ahead and promote. This is the grant orientation workshop. And the purpose of this workshop is to just orient you to both our online system, which can be challenging for people, as well as orient you to the guidelines and just kind of the general expectations of our granting program of our grantees. Now, that said, Kate Middaugh, who's on the call, will be teaching a grant writing workshop next week. And those dates and virtual meeting information, those are on our website. I'll show you that today. But that workshop will be dedicated to the process of writing grants. So Kate has a 5-step strategy in approaching grant writing. She'll go over that and kind of give you tips and tricks on how to write a successful grant. So I'm not going to be talking about how to write a grant today. I'm going to be talking about how to navigate our system. Yes, Kate's workshops will be recorded and posted online. Right now, those workshops are dedicated or scheduled for May 17th from 2 to 3 and May 18th from 5:30 to 6:30. We will record those and post those, at least one of those, on our website. And same with this. This is also being recorded and will be posted on our website for the grantees that are not able to make it. Neither of neither the orientation or the workshop, grant writing workshop, are required of our applicants. We just look at it as a way to provide more accessibility to our program and answer any questions that might come up in the process. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Let me just go, here we go. So let me just arrange my desktop so I can see the chat. Give me 1 second. Before we dive in, are there any questions that I can answer for anybody? Okay, then I'm gonna dive in. And again, feel free to interrupt. This isn't a formal, you know, I am fine with being interrupted. So the first thing I want to do is start with the guidelines. And just for your information, I'll be going over the guidelines for both general support and project support. Project support is not open for applicants yet, but the preliminary guidelines have been released. We released all of this information rather early because we acknowledge that there's a lot of demands on your time right now with all of the many grant programs that are being announced and released throughout the state. ZAP is open right now. The state is about to announce their timeline as well. So we wanted to give you all as much time to kind of prepare for grant writing season as was possible. So please know that what I'm about to show you, there are two buckets, general support and project support. General support is open. It's been open since April 30th. Project support is not open, but we have preliminary guidelines that we're going to review today, but they are subject to change. So with that, I'm going to start on our website. So I am over here. Oh, can everyone see my screen, by the way? You should see Finch Lane and the Salt Lake Arts Council. Yeah, good. Thanks, Sophia. So I'm on saltlakearts.org. This is just the Salt Lake City Arts Council's general website where we post all of our information about the various projects we have. With that, I'll do a little plug for our Living Traditions Festival. Living Traditions Festival has been broken up to multiple weekends throughout the months of May and June. Our first event is this Saturday. So if you and your family want to come out and enjoy some amazing food and amazing performances and craft vendors from our multicultural communities throughout the Valley, please come. It will be socially distanced and masked and outdoors. It will be very fun. And that information can be found here under programs. I digress. Grants. So it's right on the top. Click on it. The URL, I'll go ahead and put in the chat for y'all. It is just saltlakearts.org/city-arts-grants /. And just the purpose of this grant is to design to provide financial support for art programs and projects in Salt Lake City. Pretty standard. The Salt Lake Arts Council receives money and funding directly from the mayor's budget each year, and it's subsequently approved by the city council each year with the budget approval. This year, we're projecting about $350,000 in grant funding that will go out through these two programs, the project and general support. It's usually split up about half and half. I should go ahead and confront right now that we have integrated arts learning as a standalone category into project and general support. So if you're on here and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I got an arts learning grant last year, what does this mean for me? It means that you need to determine whether or not you should apply in general or project support based off of the size and scope of your organization. And then you just mark in your application that you're an arts learning applicant. We found that 80% of the people or organizations rather receiving money in arts learning were receiving money in general support or project support. And to us, that was a flag saying, hey, we're duplicating the application process for these people. And we're also duplicating the amount of work required in their evaluation process. So we streamlined it, we simplified it. If you have specific questions related to arts learning, please give me a call or an email and I'm happy to answer those. But let's dive into the actual guidelines for general support. Like I said, these can be found on our website. This is the information for the grants orientation process. This is you right now. And then this is the information for our free grant writing workshop. And this is that information right there. So if you scroll down, the big thing you're going to see is general support grants. And if you click this, it should pull up a PDF just like this. I'm just going to go over this with you and answer any questions you might have. Feel free to chime in, raise your hand, unmute yourself. I will answer those questions. So the kind of high level description of general support is that They're designed to assist arts and cultural mission-driven organizations with general operating expenses and the continuation or expansion of their arts and cultural focused program within Salt Lake City. So organizations funded in general support must demonstrate high levels of artistic programming excellence values and foster cultural equity and cultivate a social impact in the community. So kind of high level overview. The new for 21 is just what I mentioned about the integration of arts learning into the general grant support as well as project support. You're free to read that verbatim, but I'm just gonna go ahead and move on to our timeline for you. I'm gonna kind of jump around the guidelines just because it's kind of easier to follow along. So the timeline. So we released the preliminary guidelines on April 12th. The application and the guidelines were solidified on April 30th. And they're currently open. So as of today, you can go into our grant software and you could even submit your grant if you wanted to be that bold. But the grants orientations are these 2 days, and then our grant deadline is June 3rd at 5 p.m. So that is a little over 3 weeks from now. And that in total, we gave our applicants about 5 weeks from application open to application close. But if you count in the time that we had the criteria available, it was actually 8 or 9 weeks. So we really wanted y'all to be able to engage in the process in a thoughtful way. The committee to review these grants, it's made up of 6 members from our board of directors. We operate as a governmental nonprofit, so we have several board members that are appointed by the mayor to serve as our advisory board, but also our governance board, and then they form a subcommittee to evaluate our grants. They evaluate you on the criteria outlined in these guidelines. So they'll evaluate 6 or 7 questions on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being extraordinary, 0 being does not meet the criteria at all. And then my job is to actually take their scores, put them in a digestible format, and then the committee will come back and determine the specific award amount for each of our grantees. Following that process, we have a list of recommended award amounts. Those go to our general board of directors. And that general board of directors is all of them, they're the final say in the actual distribution of the funds. So in theory, they could pick out one award and say, hey, that doesn't really align with this, that, or the other, and they could alter that. But I will say, just historically speaking, the committee does make that really robust deep dive into the grant evaluations. So really what they recommended does get approved. But I bring that up because the board review and approval happens in our August board meeting. In the past, grantees have come to this meeting. It is a public meeting because, like I said, we're a governmental nonprofit. And so all of our meetings have to comply with Open Records and Accountability Acts. So if you want to go to that meeting, it's in August, and that meeting information will be posted on Utah's public meeting information site, which I'm happy to put in this chat once I am able to pull up Google and get it out there. So after that board meeting, we'll send an email to y'all letting you know of the board's final decision. In that email, you'll be prompted to either accept or decline the award within a few weeks, I believe. And then once you've accepted, once you've signed your grant agreement form, we'll actually process the check and get that the first half, so 50% of whatever your award is, we'll get that out within 10 business days or 2 calendar weeks from the date you sign your grant acceptance form. And then you basically have from September 1st to August 31st of 2022 to spend your money. And then with the submission of your final report, we'll give you your final payment, that final 50%. So if you spend that money really quickly, it's not unheard of for people to get their second payment in October or November. And some people wait until June or July. And with that, I will remind everybody on this call who are recipients of last year's funds, you need to spend that money and get that final evaluation report in before the end of August of this year. Any questions on the timeline before I move forward? Okay, I will go ahead and go up to our this is the deadline. I just kind of went over that. But let's go into eligibility. So general support is different than project support. So this is, oh, are there other reports during the year? Carrie, great question. No other reports during the year, but there are certain expectations during the year. So for example, we do ask everyone within their grant agreement form to acknowledge the funds from Salt Lake Arts Council with a logo placement or a simple, you know, this project supported by type thing. Pretty standard for most grant applications, but that's the only thing that we ask for during the year. And there might be the occasional, hey, like this is a great example. We were invited to be on a podcast a few weeks ago. So I actually reached into our pool of applicants and said, hey, Jorge Rojas, will you join us for this podcast? Wasn't a requirement, but he gladly agreed to come onto this podcast and support our program. So there might be some ad hoc requests during the year, but the general expectation is that you just keep doing good work and submit that final report. So eligibility for general support. So you have to be a 501c. Oh, okay, thanks. Great. Thanks, Carrie. You have to be a 501c3 nonprofit with an arts and or culture mission. Kind of the example I'll use here is like United Way. United Way is a fantastic organization that occasionally dips itself into arts programming, but generally speaking, their mission is dedicated to health and human services, right? So that's not the kind of organization that should be applying in general support. That said, I could see them potentially submitting an application for project support, but we can go into that later. So arts and culture driven organizations dedicated to kind of those premises. Additionally, you need to be in operations for at least 3 years. So our new nonprofits, we love you, we love the innovation, but I'm gonna encourage you to look at the project support instead of the general support if you don't have those 3 continuous years of operations. Let's see, oh, did I see it? Oh, someone else is just joining, okay. So let's go on. So the general support category also only supports organizations based in Salt Lake City. Now, the common question I get here is, well, I'm based in South Salt Lake City. My business address is in South Salt Lake City, but the primary function of my organization has its operations in Salt Lake or Salt Lake City School District. We love you. You're amazing. Thanks for doing programming in Salt Lake City, but you have to be an organization based in Salt Lake City for general support. Again, this is an opportunity where I would say, hey, thanks for providing programming. Why don't we look at project support for your organization instead of general support? The other one is having administrative staff. This is another big hang up for a lot of organizations, especially ones that are volunteer driven. As of right now, you can have volunteer staff, but they need to have a substantial investment in the organization of their time. And we do this because the communication and the reporting requirements, they're a lot for a volunteer to handle. So if you are one of those kind of nonprofits that has a 20-hour-a-week volunteer, that's great. But what we'll want to see in your grant is that you kind of indicate or elaborate that this person's been dedicated to the organization for X number of years. Even though they're volunteer, they handle our books and they handle our email requests. We just want someone who we can engage with as the funder if anything ever comes up. Any questions so far on the 3 eligibility criteria we've gone over? Okay. So this is a hang up as well. So matching funds. So within general support, you have to have a one-to-one match. This match can be made up of cash, earned income, public or private support, or a combination of this support, but it can't be in kind. Here's the caveat. If you mark that you're gonna request funds for arts learning, so I'll use an example. I run a small chamber music nonprofit that does after-school programming. So I want to request $5,000 for just general administration or general support, but I also want to ask for $5,000 to support my after-school chamber music group in junior highs on the west side. I would mark I'm an arts learning applicant. And within that, I would be able to count 25% of my match as in kind, but only if I'm arts learning enhanced, which means I provide some sort of arts education focus. So pay special attention to that. If you are making that arts learning request, you can have 25% of your match be in kind. But that's limited to donated facilities. So just kind of pay attention to this specific question, or sorry, eligibility criteria if you are that arts learning enhancement. And feel free to ask me questions if you have them. Any questions on that? Okay, so the next criteria is that you have to apply any awarded funding to those services and activities which occur within Salt Lake City boundaries. So this happens for some of our larger nonprofits that operate both within Salt Lake City, but also maybe in West Valley or beyond, right? They won't be able to use our general support grants to support their efforts outside of the city. They need to be able to justify that the funds that Salt Lake City is giving them will be used in Salt Lake City. And this is simply because we're a publicly funded grant program. And so the taxpayers of Salt Lake City are the ones paying for these dollars. So they need to see the public benefit. Pretty simple there. And they just need to be applied for services and activities occurring between September 1st of 2021 and August 31st of 2022. This is just our grant cycle. You can't use them for payroll from June of this year or July of this year. It's got to be for the kind of spending period. And then finally, this is kind of the one that we need to pay special attention to if you've received funds in the past. You need to be in good standing. And right now, that might not mean that you've submitted a final report. That's okay. We acknowledge that COVID's kind of prolonged people's spending periods, but it does mean that if you have a change request form that hasn't been approved, that's not being in good standing. So just make sure you're in good standing. And if you have a question about your standing with the program, feel free to shoot me an email. Okay, those are eligibility. Now let's go over limitations. Just these are pretty self-explanatory. So we can't award funds for any projects already completed or within the last grant cycle. We can't provide funds for travel or programming outside of Salt Lake City. We can't provide funds for for-profit businesses. We can't provide funds for deficit reduction, so we can't pay off your credit cards. We won't pay for fundraising events. So if this is to sponsor your annual gala, cannot do that. And if we award you funds and you shift them over to pay for your gala, that would put you in bad standing. So pay special attention to that. Capital expenditures, so we can't build buildings, we can't put our names on rooms, and then we have to have programs and services which are open to the public and not restricted to members. So if you're a gallery space that's members only, you wouldn't be able to request funds. You'd need to open up your gallery for public attendance because again, public benefit for Salt Lake City residents. So those are the guidelines, kind of the long and short of the guidelines. Do we have any questions on the guidelines before I move into the software? No? Great. Well, yeah, let's go into the software. Do items such as costume instruments count as capital? No, those I think those can be applied within just like general program expenses, even though they kind of stay with the org. Okay, so let's go here. I'm gonna go back. So from this page, you should be able to scroll down and it says apply for a city arts grant. And this is the 1, 2, 3 step for getting onto our online portal. If you have if you've been awarded a grant within the last 5 years, you should already have a profile. And if you have access issues with that profile, you need to let me know. I don't want you to create a new profile because this becomes like basically a living database for us. I can go in and I can look up, Plan B theater, and I can look and see how much money they've received. I can see if they have any outstanding reports. So it's really important that you keep everything in one profile. Now we can always make changes to contact information if that's necessary. Don't feel like it's, if you've had staff turnover, we can fix that. But within here, you can simply click on these links and they'll pull up our grant interface software. That's kind of what it's called, is grant interface. Now I've created just kind of like a general login. I have, of course, an administrative login, but I'm going to pretend as if I'm a grantee, a grant applicant today. So on this is kind of the page you'll see. Let's see. Oops. The home page will look like this. The thing I want to flag for any new applicants is that when you create your profile, you'll be asked to provide an EIN. So just make sure you know your EIN. All nonprofits, registered nonprofits, I should say, with their 501c3 designation should have that number. And that's what you'll want to put in your organization information. So when you log on, this is kind of what you see. It will show you active requests and it will show you historical requests, which are the requests maybe you've already received funding for, or requests that you didn't get funding for, but those show here too. And like I said, this is where we communicate through for everybody through this software. So it's really important that if you have email alerts set up, for example, that these emails aren't going to your spam. So it's your responsibility as the grantee to make sure that your email can accept emails from this portal. And failure to do that, like if you miss a deadline or if you miss a report, it all goes through here. So you kind of have to take accountability there for that process. So this is your applicant dashboard. So it will show you that I had a draft of a previous grant here, which is an active request. It's obviously past due, so I can't do anything with it. But if you go to apply, it should show you all of our open opportunities. And if they're open, it has this little apply button. It says accepting submissions from April 30th to June 3rd. So it's right there. Gives you kind of a high level overview. And then it also links to our grant guidelines, that PDF that I was just showing you. So you can simply apply, or I'm just going to preview it because I don't want to start an application, because I just want to go over the application real quick for you. So when you preview it, this is what you see, and you can actually start doing the application. So we have 6 general categories within our grant. Applicant eligibility information is just a quick yes/no series of questions. And if you don't answer yes to all of these, you're not eligible to apply. So this one's asking about your nonprofit status. This is asking about being based in Salt Lake City. And this is asking if you have administrative staff. It can be paid or volunteer. Mark yes or no. If you mark no to any of these, you can apply. It won't let you move forward. And you'll probably need to apply within project support. The next section is just applicant description. So this is your basic stuff. This is your boilerplate. You're going to put in your organization. You're going to put in your mission. You're going to put whether or not you've received funding. Also, in this section, none of this is going to be scored. Is there a link to a map of city limits? There sure are. So within that question right here, so it'll ask you right here under applicant information, what district you're in. And this is, none of this is scored. None of the applicant information is scored. This is just helpful information for us to be accountable to city government. So if you click this, it will show you, oh, apparently it's not, the city does this. I'll update that. But yes, there's a link, and hopefully, oh, it's because it's missing an HTML right there. I'll update that. Let me just write that down. Update link. Thanks for that, Carrie. So mission, just copy and paste that. Applicant history. So have you received city arts funds? So this is specific to the city arts grants. And there's also a question about other city funding. So this includes, like, does the mayor sponsor your annual gala? Are you receiving ACE funding, which is our Arts, Culture, and Events Fund, which is operated out of the mayor's budget? Some nonprofits might even receive a general appropriation. So just mark yes or no. It not scored, it's just helpful information. And then this is the arts learning enhancement. So does your organization support arts learning activities that reach youth ages 3 to 18? And this is, we want you to think of this as really open accessibility. So by means of all backgrounds, abilities, and then subsequently, do you plan to use a portion of our award to support your arts learning activities? So if you are this, then mark yes. And then if you mark yes, you'll have to answer a few additional questions, which are clearly identified, but I just want to flag that for you all. Now, everyone always asks me how much can I ask for? Last year it was 1,000 to 10,000, but with the integration of arts learning as a category, we increased this to 15,000. So if you mark yes to this question, you're eligible to kind of request up to the maximum. If you mark no to this, I would choose to request 10,000 or less, just kind of knowing what I know about the available funds and kind of what our historic average is. Our historic average within this pot of money is about $6,500, give or take. So just keep that in mind. We have a huge amount of requests. We can never fund them all. So yeah, if you mark yes to arts learning, you can request the maximum. If you don't, you can request about 10,000. And then this just reiterates the in-kind match requirements that I went over already. Is there a cost to participate? Only required for applicants who mark yes. So you'll see this on the, if you mark yes, you'll see this big, bright, red, bold letters that say, only answer this question if you marked yes to arts learning. So that example being, I run an after-school chamber music group. If I charge students tuition, I would mark yes. And then here I would mark, I charge them a reduced price, and you can evaluate on why you do charge or why you don't charge. And then council district, that just shows you districts 1 through 7. Artistic discipline, kind of pretty self-explanatory there. And then these are the numbers of your most completed fiscal year. We just need to know your full-time staff, part-time staff, volunteers, how many artists are participating, how many performances take place within Salt Lake City, total attendance, and then any comments you might add there. And then the final is you can provide a PDF document or a Word document for that matter. But you can provide something which shows your organization's programs and services. A lot of people will attach like an annual report. Those are really helpful here. It can be multiple pages. It just has to be one file. So like I said, annual reports are great. You can also do like some sort of impact report here, or even just like a simple, these are my 5 programs. These are their individual kind of objectives, and this is how it fits in with the mission of my organization. Any questions before I move on? Okay, so that is your applicant description information. So this is a scored section, this program description. Each of these will be scored. They will be scored on the criteria outlined here. So this first one is just talk about your goals. This should just be pretty simple, like in 2022, I hope to recover from the pandemic. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's why I'm going to do it. And then this last sentence talks about the grant committee is looking, what the grant committee is looking for. Generally speaking, they're looking for basically specific, measurable, actionable, real, and timely goals. So your specific SMART goals. They're looking for detailed information. They're looking for thoughtful responses. The character limit is 2,000 here. You're welcome to use all of the characters, but I would suggest not using anything less than 1,000. Anything less than 1,000 shows that you're not really taking this application very seriously. And don't just copy and paste. I'm not going to get into too much of the grant writing 101, but Kate will next week. So those are the goals. The arts learning enhancement description, again, this is only required if you mark yes in the above section. This just talks about what you're going to do and how it helps to accomplish your mission as an organization. 1,500 character limit. Artistic programming and excellence. So just tell us how you maintain a high level of artistic excellence within your project or your program. 1,750 characters there. That's kind of your 3 easy questions for programming description. Work samples. Work samples are different than programs and services because this is just like your opportunity to brag a little bit. If you have an awesome video that shows kind of a high level overview of your organization or maybe a project that you worked on, simply make a link, put it into a PDF, and submit that PDF here. You can include multiple links, but this is just, like I said, a moment for you to brag about how awesome your organization is. You can include flyers or postcards. You can include links to music samples or letters of support are another great way. So if you have a letter of support from an organization with a little bit of clout, if you will, you're welcome to submit that here. The final, and this is a scored section. So the final section is on community description. So this is 3 more questions. So in total, you're going to be scored on 6 or 7 questions and your budget. So I guess that makes it 8. But we want you to talk about your value to the community. So are you providing programming that's relevant to Salt Lake City residents? Are you making the city safer? Anything that you do to contribute to the value of our community, brag about that here. Second, we want you to define what community means to you. So this could be, let's see, please describe your audience with the audience you anticipate participating in your programming. So like using my music example of an after school program, if it's going to be on the West Side, I'll talk about these amazing students on the West Side. I'll talk about maybe some demographic information or how my program helps elevate their academic achievements. Great opportunity for you to talk about the people you serve. And the final one is just on inclusion. So talk about what inclusion means to you and how you're addressing maybe equity issues. Tanner has a question. If we are bringing in a writer with a national representation, should we provide work samples from that person or stick to a broader sample from our organization? You could do both. I would suggest doing both, because what we want to see there, Tanner, or sorry, it's Susan, not Tanner. Susan, what we want to see there, Susan, is both the awesome reputation of Tanner, as well as kind of the weight of this nationally recognized artist as contributing to the overall effect of your application. Does that answer your question, Susan? Perfect. So the last thing I want to go over is our budget. We have about 20 minutes. I want to leave 10 minutes for questions though. So within budget, if you click this, it should download for you. And the budget's pretty simple. I know that a lot of people are worried about budgets. So I'll spend some time in here kind of going over the purpose of the budget. So the purpose of the budget isn't to say, gotcha, you didn't balance your budget. It isn't designed to like be hyper surveil any of our applicants. The budget is just there to make sure that y'all are thinking thoughtfully of, I want to do this, and this is the funding required in order to accomplish it. And that can look a few different ways. You can show us that you have a lot of support for this. You can show us through corporate, foundation, individual, and in-kind. Just because you can't count in-kind for the match doesn't mean that you shouldn't brag about all of the in-kind services you get here to support. The big thing for budgets is just making budget comments. So, especially if your budget doesn't balance, which I highly recommend a balanced budget. All of our grant evaluators will basically flag any grant that doesn't have a balanced budget as being potentially a problem. So please do everything you can to balance your budget, meaning that your expenses and your income zero each other out. A budget surplus is going to raise a flag, and a budget deficit is going to raise a flag. So just do everything you can to incorporate a balanced budget. And then here's where you do that in-kind service, making sure that it's not more than 25%. But this is a pretty standard budget form. You're going to talk about earned income, private support, public support, and then you're going to talk about salaries and wages, and then programming and admin expenses. Any questions on the budget? Okay. Well, y'all, that is the orientation for general support. And project support, I'm just going to go over the guidelines, which aren't much different than general support. And the questions are pretty much the same as well. So let me pull up the guidelines for project support. They're located on that same page, just a little bit further down. And project support is basically what it sounds like. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, if one has a budget surplus because several events are canceled due to COVID, how do you suggest handling that? Susan, I would just make it as clear as possible with big, bold, red letters in the budget narrative that we have a budget surplus because of X, Y, or Z. And especially mentioning COVID is kind of like, we get it. Everybody's pivoting, everybody's being agile this year. So if it's due to COVID, we have a budget surplus at the Arts Council because of that same reason. So no need to worry there. Perfect. So project support is just like it sounds. This is, again, a one-to-one match and the same kind of process as general support. Again, there is the arts learning enhancement, but if you have the arts learning enhancement, we want you to delineate between community-based programming and arts-based programming. The due date here is June 24th. We also have a second due date for project support, and that's in November. And we do that because we acknowledge that like big programs and events are hard to plan, especially a year out. So the November deadline is for events that occur between February 1st and August 31st. That said, if you have an event in June of 2022 and you want to meet this deadline and you have the ability to answer all these questions robustly, you can apply in June. There's no limit on that. It's just for the organizations that need a little bit more time to thoughtfully plan their event. We have that second deadline. Same eligibility requirements here without the 3-year operating kind of caveat. And then a few more limitations here. Let's see. Nope, same limitations. So that, and then there's the 2 separate timelines, and the timelines are basically the same with the exception of a different due date and a different open date. These applications don't open till May 21st. So this is just a few weeks away. And then your questions are pretty similar. Oh, and in the guidelines, all the questions are listed as well. I just kind of showed you them in this portal. Similar questions, I should say, around applicant description. The only difference here is we do ask for a project beginning and end date, since it's project specific and not just kind of general support. And then we ask you to provide specifics for the project numbers. And then this is kind of a flag for you all to consider. Because of COVID, we're accepting applications for virtual events, but you need to make sure they're broadcasted in Salt Lake City or performed in Salt Lake City. And you need to just be specific in the language you're using to describe how the event will be kind of rolled out, if you will. So the scored section on this is provide a project description, which is a different question, but kind of the same to program description. Artistic excellence is the same. Work samples is the same. Value to the community and diversity inclusion are all the same, and the budget's the same. So with that, I zoomed through that. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see anybody who might want to ask questions. But yeah, this is your opportunity. The next 13 minutes we'll dedicate to answering any specific questions you have. These can be specific to your organization or specific to the process, whatever you want to talk about, I'm here.
So quick question, just because I'm new to this, for our organization, can we apply for both or is it one or the other?
Ooh, good question. It is one or the other for these 2 grant programs. That said, there are opportunities in the future where we get kind of special funding through budget amendments. And that's not limited to only one or the other. And what happens often is I'll have people apply in general support that maybe aren't strong applicants in general support. And I'll actually ask that we move their project or program from general support to project support to increase their likelihood of funding.
Gotcha.
So we're looking
Gotcha.
out for you. We're trying to make sure that you get kind of put into the program that makes the most sense for the organization and where you're at.
Because you want to give the money away, right?
Want to give the money away, exactly. And I will say that like this year has been especially challenging with COVID. We've had a lot of requests for changes and pivots and requests that would probably normally not be accepted. They're being accepted this year just because we understand there's such a challenge with COVID. So just keep that in mind. We're still definitely well within the pandemic. And so we're just wanting to get this money out and to provide as much support as we can for you all.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Did that answer your question, Carrie? Okay. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
In the past, the review committee has suggested that some U of U events don't have a broad enough citywide impact.
Mhm.
And for me, I would love some tips on how to make that clear that, you know, for example, if we are bringing in a nationally renowned writer, it isn't just for the university campus, it's more of a citywide, but
Yeah.
maybe we're not making a good enough argument for that. And some have suggested that, or some reviews have suggested it should be at a city location instead of the U. But also the venues are bigger, you know, at the U. So it's just sort of a tricky space to be in. And I just would love some advice from you on that.
Susan, that's a great question. And I'll preface it with my previous role was with Weber State University Development, and that was always a challenge in raising money for anything that happened on campus at the university. So I hear you, I feel you. What I would suggest is two things. Kate always does such a good job at helping provide that justification for funding. So A, use Kate, but B, I would just flag the community description section for you to pay special attention to, specifically to the value of the community. And within that section, maybe talking about how you're targeting specific efforts on outreach and engagement of historically underserved or underrepresented communities, and how you're using these funds to get them onto campus and the value of having them on campus. For example, I worked on a Latinos in Action grant a few years ago, and we found that like getting this population of Latinx youth onto campus increases their likelihood of attending higher education after high school by 4 times. So I put that in every grant, and everyone was always so excited that I wasn't having the event in Ogden proper. I was having it on campus because it increased access to higher education. So that's kind of what I would suggest there.
And Taylor, this is Kate. I would agree 100%. That was going to be my advice, and I can go into more detail, you know, when we set up a time to talk. But outreach, how do you do your outreach, the targeted outreach, and then adding in those secondary goals of increasing the likelihood of, you know, people coming into college and feeling comfortable on the campus when you have events there.
Great.
One follow-up is that a lot of our projects are for lifelong learners. So that's not, anyway, Kate, I will definitely speak with Kate as I'm developing our application, but just thank you for the tips and advice. I appreciate it.
No problem. I have a question in the chat from Rachel. She says, in the project support application for the one-to-one match requirement, can this include projected earned income? For example, projecting the income from ticket sales for the project, or does the match funds already have to be secured? The match funds don't already have to be secured. The entire budget is in essence a budget projection because we're asking you to budget for the next fiscal year. What I will say is what I failed to highlight in project support is you can't use matching support at all in project support, just because these requests are lower in value and it's fairly easy to receive project support dollars from various sources, whereas general support is pretty hard to come by with most like even private, corporate, and public support. So that's the only thing. The verbatim in the guidelines is a little bit preliminary at this point, but feel free to go and review that, Rachel. I'll put that in the chat right now for you to flag. Did that answer your question, Rachel? But yes,
yes, that was helpful.
You can definitely use earned income as a category. It's a category in the budget spreadsheet.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Other questions? They can be specific to your org or not.
I have a lot of questions.
Do it. I love it.
So could I bundle multiple things in one support project support grant? So if we have a series, for example, it's called Author Meets Reader, readers, and we're going to try to bring in 3 readers throughout the entire year, or 3 writers throughout the entire year. Can I bundle those together, or do I need to like do them separately?
You can only support one project, only submit one project support. So that's actually what you need to do.
Okay.
You just put your beginning date as the first date that event happens and your last date as the last event that happens. And then you just describe within like the project description, here's our first event. It happens on September 3rd. Here's the author we're bringing in. This is why they're amazing. Here's the second event. Here's the author. Here's why they're amazing. And you just outline it in kind of the project description section. But yes, if it's a series, put it in one application. And we even have people who submit one project support request for multiple series in their organization. So they'll say like, I'm a multidisciplinary arts nonprofit. Here is my music series. Here is my dance series, and here's my theater series. And as long as it's clearly delineated within the kind of narrative section, you are able to highlight and bold and underline within our grant software, which makes the reading pretty easy. I don't think you can highlight, you can bold and underline and italicize, but just kind of making it as clear as possible that it is a series as opposed to like a one and done event.
Thanks.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, well then what I'll do is I'll close with just the reminder that if you want that individual support for Kate, Kate has put in the chat her email and her phone number. Y'all can access this support now. So feel free to send that email, get on her calendar. Additionally, Kate will be teaching those 2 grant writing workshops, like I mentioned, on May 17th from 2 to 3, as well as May 18th from 5:30 to 6:30. That information is on our website. I will chat that just once more, so it's at the top of the chat. And I would encourage you all to utilize it. I have written grants for a decade, and Kate always teaches me something. And one of the best things you can do with grant submissions is have a second set of eyes on the grant. And if that is all you use Kate for, that is what I want you to use Kate for. This is for you, it is not for us. And we just want to make sure that you all have as much support in the process. And additionally, if you require like access, or if there's like a digital divide issue with your organization, let me know. We have some resources that are kind of new at the Arts Council that I would love to help connect you to better equipment or better technology. We can work through that if at all possible. So with that, I'm going to chat my email in the chat, and you all can reach out if you have any questions. Oh, I forgot the hold on. You all can reach out to me directly with specific questions. And again, I'll teach this course tomorrow from 6 to 7 for anybody who has work during the day and can't come. And then this recording will be posted on our website if you want to revisit any of the things we've talked about. So with that, any last minute questions? Okay. You all are the best, and best of luck for grant writing season. It's going to be a tough one this year with all of the deadlines, but we can do it. And have a great Monday, and I'll see you all later.